As many of you know, I'm currently hard at work on my video essay about Breath of the Wild. I'm having a lot of fun drafting the script so far, and I'm really excited to bring you all another in-depth critique, this time focusing on a game I really love. But there's a criticism I've received over and over again in my comment section since the release of my Tears of the Kingdom video, and it's something that I think bears addressing.
This whole video is such nitpicking the little things that make basically every open world bad.
Over 3 hours of nitpicking. Prompt dislike. Yes, it is nitpicking. And yes,
Everything you said
TOTK
is
was
basically a
complete on
nitpick.
arrival.
I agree with this
DLC
whole amount
Holy
of it.
shit,
necessary
you are
with how
so
much content is in
nitpicky.
the game.
Jesus.
Also,
People seem to really love accusing me of nitpicking. That accusation pretty much always carries a negative connotation, like it's something I'm doing wrong. But I think the behavior that other people are quick to characterize as nitpicking isn't actually a bad thing, and complaints about nitpicking are often nothing more than a lazy way of shutting down criticisms that people don't agree with. The Cambridge Dictionary defines nitpicking as giving too much attention to details that are not important, especially as a way of criticizing. My copy of the Merriam-Webster and Garfield Dictionary defines nitpicking as minute and usually unjustified criticism. Basically, when someone is nitpicking, they're being overly critical of small, unimportant details. The issue with this definition is it presupposes which details are or aren't important enough to be worth mentioning. When does something cease to be a legitimate criticism and just become a nitpick? How small is too small? Imagine for a moment that you're in an English class. Your teacher hands back your essay and it's covered in red marks. Your grammar was a mess, you used the wrong your more than once, your quotes weren't cited properly, you forgot to add page numbers, and so you got a bad grade. Did your teacher do anything wrong by pointing out these small mistakes? Do you storm into her office and accuse her of nitpicking? Of course not. Because that's her job. She's not being abusive or unfair. She's highlighting your mistakes so that you're able to learn from them. But maybe you take issue with that analogy. After all, if the teacher asked you to number your pages or use a certain citation style and you didn't do that, that's an objective mistake, not a subjective criticism. So let's try this. Imagine you're in an art class and it's critique day. You show your painting to your professor and he's not impressed. He says your perspective is all off, the colors don't complement each other well, the composition is messy, and there's no depth or texture. Are any of these qualities objectively bad? Well, no, not necessarily. If you tried, you could probably find examples of famous artists who deliberately experiment with things like composition, color, and perspective to great effect. But your professor has been doing this for years. He's judging your work with a trained eye, and if you were to accuse him of simply nitpicking your piece, you'd be rightfully laughed out of the room. The interesting thing to me is that in both of these examples, the person being criticized or nitpicked is you. It's understandable to feel defensive when you're being criticized, and critique is possibly the hardest part of making art, whether that's writing, sculpture, you name it. But then, why do people react so adversely when you criticize a piece of media they enjoy? You're not attacking them personally, they didn't make the game or movie or TV show in question, so what's going on? Why do they get so defensive? Well, most people don't know exactly why they like or dislike something. It can be especially hard to nail down exactly what you like or dislike about art forms like movies, music, or video games, since there's just a lot going on and the terminology isn't always accessible. How do you explain why you like a song if you don't know anything about music theory or music production or even the name of that one instrument you really like the sound of? Well, maybe you use an adjective like catchy or upbeat. Maybe you describe how it makes you feel to listen to it, and honestly, most of the time that will be more than enough. But just like it's okay to simply enjoy or not enjoy something, it's also okay to dive deep and figure out exactly why you feel the way you do. Just to pick a totally random video game as an example, say you're playing Tears of the Kingdom. You're having fun with the game. It's gorgeous to look at, you build your silly little car, you do some war crimes, but then you put the game down, and suddenly you find yourself reluctant to pick it back up. You feel unsatisfied, like something was missing, even though you had fun in the moment. You don't have to interrogate that cognitive dissonance, but there's nothing wrong with doing so. And that brings us back to nitpicking. The word comes from the actual practice of nitpicking, that is, removing nits, the tiny eggs laid by head lice, from someone's hair. Both literal and figurative nitpicking require a close attention to detail as you comb through tens of thousands of individual strands of hair looking for those pesky little eggs. When you find them, you're finally able to put your finger on what exactly was bothering you. You notice the disconnect between the story and the gameplay, the clunky user interface, the lack of compelling rewards for quests, the 81 Addison signs. Did you ruin the game for yourself? Was this quote-unquote nitpicking a meaningless or even harmful exercise? No! because that discomfort, that itch, was what led you to examine the game with a fine-tooth comb to begin with. Are all of the issues you discovered equally important? Do they ruin the game irreparably in and of themselves? Well, no, but now you have the language with which to discuss what about the game didn't work for you, and that level of care can actually deepen your appreciation for a game in the long run. The whole reason I'm making this video is because, in the process of writing my Breath of the Wild video, I noticed myself making observations or little criticisms that I anticipate people will write off as just nitpicks. But I'd ask you to reconsider that framing. When you tell someone they're nitpicking, you're pointing out their obsessive attention to detail. But isn't that the whole point of an in-depth critique? Isn't that why you clicked on the video in the first place? It's funny, because when critics point out small things that they like, that's praised as insightful. Here, attention to small details is suddenly a good thing, and I think that kinda gives the game away. What people call nitpicks are just pieces of evidence that support a conclusion they disagree with.